Little boy left a letter on a CEO's car, not knowing it would change his mother's life forever. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. He was the kind of man who had it all. A gleaming black car, an expensive watch that ticked with precision, and a corner office that overlooked the city skyline. Every morning was the same. He pulled up to the tower, same spot, same time, pressed a button on his key fob, and walked inside without a second thought. But that morning, there was something different. Taped to the windshield of his luxury car was a small, wrinkled envelope. Not fancy, not official, just plain white paper, creased, stained, and written in large, clumsy handwriting. It read, "Please read. It's really important." He froze. This wasn't a parking ticket, not a business card. It was something else. For a moment, he considered tossing it into the passenger seat and dealing with it later. But something about the handwriting, the way "please" was underlined twice, he couldn't ignore it. He opened the envelope right there on the sidewalk, and what he found inside would stop him cold. It wasn't from a colleague or a critic. It was from a 6-year-old boy named Liam. The letter was short, simple, and heartbreaking. It said his mom worked in the building. She was a janitor. She hadn't been home in 2 days. She was tired, sad, working double shifts, crying when she thought no one could hear her. And then the last line, the one that would change everything. "If you're the boss, can you please make my mom smile again?" That sentence didn't just tug at him. It wrecked him, because in all his years of leading boardrooms, making deals, building empires, no one had ever asked him for something so human, so pure. That letter was the beginning of something no one saw coming. And the boy who wrote it, he had no idea. He was about to change not just his mother's life, but the lives of every invisible worker in that building. Let me tell you what happened next. He didn't grow up with wealth. No silver spoon. No shortcuts. But by 33, he'd built something people whispered about. A rising star in the business world. Smart, charismatic. The kind of man who spoke softly in meetings but made the whole room listen. Every morning, without fail, his black car glided through the city streets, smooth, silent, until it pulled into the same reserved spot, outside a towering glass building that shimmered in the morning sun. The security guard nodded. Barista had his coffee ready. Even the elevator seemed to know where he was headed. Routine, perfectly engineered, like the companies he ran. He liked it that way. Predictability, precision, control. But what he didn't notice, what most people didn't notice, were the people scrubbing the windows before sunrise, mopping the floors before anyone stepped in, taking out the trash before the office lights even flickered on. They were part of the background, always there, always invisible. And yet, on that ordinary morning, with the city buzzing awake, his well-oiled routine came to a quiet, unexpected stop. Not because of a flat tire, not because of a phone call, but because of that small envelope taped to his windshield. It was almost out of place, too fragile for the concrete jungle around it. He stood there, keys in hand, just staring at it, as if opening it would tear a hole in his carefully crafted world. And in a way, it did, because in that moment, he wasn't a CEO. He wasn't a boss. He wasn't a man with all the answers. He was just a guy holding a letter from a little boy who saw something no one else dared to say out loud. And that was the day everything started to change. He almost didn't see it. A thin corner of paper fluttered against a morning breeze, barely holding on under the wiper blade of his luxury car. At first glance, he thought it was junk, a flyer, maybe a notice, something to ignore. But as he stepped closer, he noticed the tape, messy, crooked, like it had been rushed, like small hands had done it in a hurry. And then he saw the handwriting. Thick, uneven letters, written in pencil, some letters backwards, others misshapen. It read, "Please read. It's really important." No logo, no business name, just those 6 words. He stared at it for a moment, not moving, not blinking, There was something about it, something that made the air feel heavier. He peeled it off the windshield carefully, like it might fall apart if he wasn't gentle. And as he stood there, surrounded by the quiet hum of a waking city, coffee in one hand, envelope in the other, he felt the stillness of something real, something different. He opened it, slowly. Inside was a folded piece of lined notebook paper, creased so many times it was soft at the edges. No greeting, no date, just a name at the bottom. Liam, age 6. The letter was simple, spelled out in large, blocky letters, with smudges where words had been erased and rewritten. Liam wrote about his mom, how she worked in the building, how she hadn't come home in 2 nights because she was doing double, how she cried sometimes when she thought he was asleep, how she forgot to eat, and then the line that hit like a punch to the chest. If you're the boss, can you please make my mom smile again? He read that line twice, 3 times, as if his brain needed a second to catch up with his heart. This wasn't a complaint, wasn't an accusation. It was a plea from a child, one who didn't understand profit margins or payroll or overtime policies, but who understood with perfect clarity that his mother was breaking in silence, and no one seemed to notice. He looked up at the building. Glass, steel, power, and for the first time, he didn't see numbers. He saw people. He saw her, whoever she was, this woman working through the night, pushing through exhaustion, hiding her tears behind restroom mirrors. The letter didn't say her name, didn't even say what floor she worked on, but it said enough. And in that moment, everything around him, the car, the suit, the schedule, suddenly felt small, because a little boy had just handed him something no executive meeting ever had: perspective. He sat back in the driver's seat, letter still in his hands. The city moved around him, horns, footsteps, morning buzz, but he couldn't hear any of it. All his attention was on that one piece of lined notebook paper, folded and refolded until the creases had almost torn through. His eyes scanned the first lines again. Clumsy handwriting, spelling mistakes here and there, but every word was filled with something no business memo ever carried. Truth. Hi, my name is Liam. I'm 6. My mom works in your building. I think she's been gone a lot. She works late now and doesn't come home. I think she sleeps there. He paused, sank deeper into the seat. She used to laugh with me. We made pancakes. Now she doesn't smile. She cries when she thinks I don't see her. She's always tired. Sometimes she doesn't eat her dinner, just gives it to me and says she's not hungry. The CEO swallowed hard. This wasn't a request for money, not a cry for attention. Just a little boy trying to understand why his mom was disappearing before his eyes. I think she's sad. I don't know why. She said she has to work extra or she'll get in trouble. But she's nice. She's the nicest person. She always tells me to be good and never complain. He could picture it now. This young mother, probably walking the same halls as executives did, cleaning up after them, smiling when no one smiled back, trying to be strong, failing quietly. If you're the boss, can you please make my mom smile again? That line sat there at the very bottom. No fancy sign-off. No sincerely. Just Liam, 6 years old, writing with all the courage he had, hoping anyone might listen. And the man holding the letter? He had built companies, led teams across continents, spoken to world leaders. But he had no words for this. Because how do you respond when a child asks you to do something you didn't even realize you'd stop caring about? Make someone smile. A person who spent months, maybe years, doing everything right, but being seen by no one. He leaned forward, letter still trembling in his hand. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't think about meetings or profits or deadlines. He thought about her, whoever she was, the woman behind the uniform, behind the smile that had quietly disappeared. The mother Liam was trying so hard to bring back. And in that moment, he made a silent promise. He would find her, not just because it was the right thing to do, but because a little boy had done something far more powerful than most grown men ever would. He'd spoken up. The boardroom was like something out of a magazine. Long polished table, floor-to-ceiling windows, 12 chairs filled with suits and silence, punctuated only by the occasional click of a pen or the hum of a laptop waking up. He was never late, but that morning, he walked in 3 minutes behind schedule. No one dared to question it. He was the CEO, but they noticed something was off. No tie, eyes a little distant. No polite good morning. He didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table, a single piece of paper in his hand, creased, worn, almost out of place in a room so perfect. A few exchanged glances, confused, waiting for the usual agenda to start. Numbers, strategy, forecasts. But it didn't. Instead, he said 5 words. I want to read something. That room, the one usually filled with confident voices, quick rebuttals and polished presentations, fell into a stillness no quarterly report had ever caused. He unfolded the paper, held it gently, like it carried more weight than anyone there could imagine, and then he began to read, slowly, word by word, line by line. Liam's voice, his tiny handwriting, echoed through a room full of grown men and women who suddenly didn't know where to look. My mom works in your building. She cries when she thinks I don't see. Can you please make my mom smile again? No one interrupted. No one moved. The usual tension of boardroom politics. Gone. This wasn't about profit anymore. It was about people. Real ones. The ones who cleaned the fingerprints off those very glass walls. The ones who worked through the night so that the company could shine by morning. He folded the letter when he finished, laid it flat on the table, and then he looked around. How did we miss this? He asked, voice steady but quiet. No one had an answer, not one, because the truth was they hadn't missed it. They just hadn't looked. For years, they'd walked past these workers. They'd seen the uniforms, but never the people inside them. They'd talk about growth, margins, expansion, but never exhaustion, never sacrifice. That letter was a mirror, and it reflected what no spreadsheet could show. He didn't yell, didn't demand. He just stood there, and something in the room shifted. Not a dramatic outburst, not a grand speech, just silence, and the uncomfortable realization that a 6-year-old boy had done what no adult in that room had thought to do. He noticed, and he cared enough to write it down. He didn't call for a meeting, didn't send out a memo, didn't announce a new initiative or policy with fanfare. Instead, he started watching, not with suspicion, but with curiosity, with intention. For the first time, he arrived at the office before the sun came up, not to get ahead of emails, but to see who was already there. And what he saw stopped him more than once. A woman, quiet, slim, mid-40s, pushing a cart cleaning supplies, her eyes barely open, her hands moving in muscle memory. A man in his 60s, kneeling on the marble floor, polishing scuff marks. No one else ever noticed. He watched them carry heavy trash bags, wipe fingerprints from a glass, pick up crumpled coffee cups left behind by people who never looked back. No greetings, no thank yous, just silence. And then he started asking questions. He found the head of building services, asked for shift schedules, payroll logs, staff rosters. He learned that some of the janitorial staff worked 12-hour shifts, split across 2 buildings, just to make ends meet. He saw that sick days were rare, not because no one got sick, but because they couldn't afford to miss a paycheck. He read reports filed and ignored, requests for new gloves, broken vacuums, mental health concerns marked non-urgent. It wasn't one person slipping through the cracks. It was an entire department, an entire group of human beings, seen as costs, not people. And still they showed up every day, every night. Liam's mother wasn't the only one crying on her lunch break. She wasn't the only one skipping meals, so her child could eat better than she did. There were stories tucked inside every pair of worn-out sneakers, every faded uniform, every forced smile, And none of them had ever reached his desk. Not until now, because it took a child, 6 years old, to hold up a flashlight to what had been hidden in plain sight for far too long. And as he stood in the hallway one morning, watching Liam's mother clean the very floors he'd walked over for years, he realized something that made his chest ache. She looked tired, so tired that even her posture apologized for taking up space. And yet, she moved with care. She took pride in her work, even when the world didn't acknowledge her. He didn't say anything that day. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching a woman who had no idea her son had just rewritten the future. Because this story, it wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to every invisible worker, whose name no one ever bothered to learn. Until now, it didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic slam of a fist on the desk, no shouting in the hallway, no viral video, just a quiet shift, a decision made alone in an office flooded with morning light by a man holding a letter written by a child. Enough was enough. He didn't need a consultant's report to tell him what was broken. He'd seen it, felt it, heard it in Liam's trembling words, and in the silence of 1,000 overlooked workers. So he rolled up his sleeves. He pulled policy drafts, reviewed outdated contracts, highlighted the fine print most people ignore, and for the first time in a long time, he wrote something that wasn't meant to impress shareholders, but to honor human beings. Better pay, guaranteed mental health days, a full review of overtime practices, immediate thank you bonuses, starting with the night shift crew. And Liam's mom, her name was now known, not because she asked for attention, but because her son refused to let the world keep ignoring her. He picked up the phone, called HR personally, said her name with care, told them, make sure she knows. Something good is coming. And then he made another call, this time to her home. The phone rang twice. She answered, cautious, tired. He introduced himself. There was a pause, long quiet. You could hear the weight in her breath. Then he said, we'd like you to come in tomorrow. You're being recognized, not for what you do, but for who you are. She didn't say much, just whispered, okay, and hung up. He sat back in his chair, letter still on his desk, creased and worn. It had been just a scrap of paper, but somehow it carried more weight than any contract he'd ever signed. It reminded him that people don't need grand gestures. They just need to be seen. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't just running a company. He was building something that mattered. The next morning felt different, not just for him, but for her. Liam's mom had barely slept. She had no idea what was waiting. The call had been vague, unusual. Please come to the office. You're being recognized. Recognized? For what? She'd spent years working in silence. No one had ever said those words before. She wore her cleanest uniform, tied her hair back just right, looked in the mirror and gave herself a nod, small, uncertain. And Liam? He held her hand the whole train ride there, swinging his legs, whispering, maybe they just want to say thank you. She smiled, tired. Maybe, baby. They walked into the building together. The same building she had cleaned top to bottom, quietly, invisibly, for years. But this time, the energy was different. People smiled, greeted her, not just with nods, but with warmth. And then she was led to the top floor, the place where the air always felt too expensive to breathe. The elevators opened, and there they were, dozens of people, executives, staff, even security, all standing, waiting, and at the front of it all, him, the CO, no suit today, just a button-down shirt, rolled sleeves, holding a microphone, nervous, but sure. He stepped forward, smiled gently, and spoke. Everyone, this is Maria. She froze, eyes wide. He continued, she's been part of this building longer than most of us. She works when no one sees. She carries more than trash bags and mop buckets. She carries strength. She carries love. She carries the heart of a little boy named Liam, who wrote a letter I'll never forget. Gasps, whispers, heads turned. And then he held up the letter, worn, folded, familiar. He read it aloud, every word. Her hand flew to her mouth, eyes filling, not with embarrassment, but with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Worth. The final line, "If you're the boss, can you please make my mom smile again?" echoed through the room like a prayer finally answered. He looked at Liam. Your mom deserved that smile. And so much more. Applause erupted. Real, loud, long. Maria stood there stunned until Liam tugged her sleeve. Mom. She looked down. You're smiling. And she was. Not forced. Not polite. Not tired. A real smile. Big. Unfiltered. Bright. The kind of smile that only shows up when someone finally feels seen, heard, valued. And for that moment, the company wasn't a company. It was a family, finally looking inward and realizing that the most powerful people aren't always the ones in suits. Sometimes they're the ones holding a mop with a heart full of love and a son brave enough to speak. The applause faded. The room slowly returned to its rhythm. But nothing was quite the same because something had shifted, not just in policy, not just in procedure, but in perspective. That afternoon, the CEO met with every department head. Quiet conversations, real ones, not about quarterly goals or market share, but about people, the ones who made the place run, long before the lights turned on, and long after the last elevator ride down. By the end of the week, new signs went up in the break rooms. Mental health days approved. New hourly rates. Thank you bonuses. Staff recognition programs. Permanent. Not flashy. Not a PR move. Just overdue. The janitorial staff received new uniforms. Better equipment. And something even more valuable, respect. Names were learned. Faces were remembered. Doors that were always closed started opening. And Liam? Well, he didn't know about the policies, or the payroll changes, or the meeting that reshaped an entire department. All he knew was that his mom came home early that week, carrying a small gift bag with her name on it. Eyes tired but brighter. He watched her take off her shoes, sit beside him on the couch, and pull him close. No words, just a long, quiet hug, the kind that says, "You did something, kiddo. You really did." And she smiled. For real. Not because someone asked her to. Not because she had to fake it. But because, for the first time in a long time, she felt seen, appreciated, loved. All because her son picked up a pencil and told the truth. And the CEO, he kept Liam's letter. Framed it right there on his office wall. Next to all the awards, the degrees, the certificates. Because out of everything he had ever accomplished, that letter changed more lives than any business deal ever could. A crumpled envelope, 6 simple words. Can you make my mom smile again? And a boy who reminded an entire company what leadership is really about. One letter, folded, crumpled, taped to a windshield by a 6-year-old boy who just wanted his mom to smile again. He didn't know the CEO. Didn't know the system, didn't even fully understand what the boss really meant. But he understood something deeper, something so many of us forget. When something feels wrong, say something, because that letter, it didn't just change a schedule, or a paycheck, or one policy buried in a corporate handbook. It changed people. It made a man in a suit look beyond the numbers and see the tired eyes of a woman who kept the building shining, while her own light dimmed silently. It made a room full of executives pause and listen, not to a market trend, but to a child's voice, shaking on paper. It reminded us all that kindness doesn't need permission, that leadership isn't about titles. It's about courage and compassion and choosing to see the people no one else is looking at. And Liam, he'll grow up one day. He might not remember every word he wrote, But what he'll always know is that his voice mattered. He made the world stop. He made it care, not with power, not with money, but with love. And maybe that's the legacy we should all strive for, to leave behind a little more humanity than we found, because sometimes it only takes one letter to change one life, and that's enough to change everything. So now you've heard the story. A boy, a letter, a mother, and a ripple that turned into real change. But here's the thing. You don't need to be a CEO to make someone feel seen. You don't need a corner office or $1 million title to make an impact. Sometimes it starts with a smile, a thank you, a question as simple as, "Hey, how are you really doing?" The people who clean your schools, bag your groceries, hold open the doors you walk through without thinking. They're not invisible. They're just waiting for someone to notice. You can be that someone. Drop a comment below. Who's someone in your life that deserves to be recognized? Someone who works hard, stays quiet, and gives their all with little to no credit. Tag them, name them, honor them, because maybe your words could be the letter that makes them smile again. And if stories like this speak to your heart, subscribe to Heartfelt Tales TV. This is where real stories live. Stories that remind us to feel, to notice, to care just a little more than we did yesterday. Let's remind the world that change doesn't always start at the top. Sometimes it starts at the bottom with someone small and brave enough to care out loud, be the change. Even if it's quiet, even if it's small, it still matters. Thank you for watching. And thank you, Liam, for reminding us all what humanity really looks like.